Jewish demographic changes from the 13th century until the expulsion from Spain. We're going to take a look at this. We'll look at it a little more closely. Today is the 19th of November in the year 2024, according to the current counting system. The Pope, our wonderful, benevolent Pope, has called for investigation of the claims that the Jews are committing genocide in Lebanon and particularly in Gaza. The popes have been friends of the Jews for a long time. Here the leftist pope is taking the side of the leftists and the Arabs. Why? He's not a friend, really. Now, for the 13th of the century until the expulsion from Spain, which was one of the great tragedies of Jewish life in Europe. So now we have a map that we're going to try to take a look at it. Let's see if I can get if I get too much closer, it's going to be hard to see it. Let's look at the legend. So here is Europe, and here you see, well, let's just look at it in general. Here's Western Europe. Okay, here's Spain, France, Bavaria, Germany, different states in those areas. This is Italy, where the Papal States are located. Hungary. Now you're moving further east, and you're getting to Poland, Lithuania, which at that time covered all the areas where the Jews lived. Russia was beyond it, further east. So Russia had still not taken over Lithuania and Poland as they continuously attempt to do. So here's the map, the key, I forget what they call this area right here. This half circle this way is an estimated number of Jews, circa the year 1300. And then estimated number of Jews before the expulsion from Spain, it grew. So at 1300 it grew to a much larger size. Then we have a new center, different new places where Jews moved, and we'll talk about that. And then we have these old centers. So here's a new center, it's Istanbul. Here's a new center around Minsk. And these are places where Jews were forced to move. Everybody had to move this way. So here's France. It's an old area. So he writes like this, and let's take a look at some of these areas. Here we have a note here. The Jewish Center develops following the ban on Jewish settlement in Russia. So Russia was further east. Could actually come this way and look at Russia too. Same idea, coming Russia, that we moving out from the Middle East and the backside of the East into Russia, but they sent the Jews away. So the Jews moved to Poland. At that time, this was Poland, Lithuania, actually Lithuania, and Minsk. There was a big center started there. We have another center over here in Jerusalem. Jews came there as well. So here he writes, Jewish center develops following the ban on Jewish settlement in Russia, that's Minsk. And then he says over here, development of Yeshuv in Holy Land following immigration of 300 rabbis in the year 1211. Rabbi Yechiel from Paris, the Nachmanides was the Ramban, 1237, and Reb Ovadia Bartanor in 1485. There was a continuous stream of learned Jews coming to the Holy Land. The Ovadia Bartanora is also known as the Rav. Now, let's take a look at it just a little bit more before we get into it more deeply. So here you see that the Kingdom of Napoli, which we actually learned in the last year, I guess I missed this box. After Turkish conquest, the Jewish community expands and becomes spiritual center. So the Turks began to spread. It became very popular, very powerful. And they invited the Jews to come. And so they did. And we did. And so here we see all the different places. In Nuremberg, there was a big community, an old Jewish community. So over here we see also in Germany, there was a lot of different communities, old communities, new communities, bigger communities. relatively speaking, we have the numbers on this map of approximately how many Jews were there at the end before the expulsion. So it grew. Whenever Jews grew before the expulsion. And so let's read as we can look. You could really freeze this and take a look at the map. You want to look at it more closely, get an idea where the Jewish communities were. But this is going to go into some detail, and we're going to see this in the next year or so, exactly what he has to say about it. So Dr. BEINART writes, "It's difficult to estimate the size of the Jewish population in the Middle Ages. Even were we able to surmise the number of Jews in any particular place, we would still be ignorant of their composition by age and sex, or the birth rate and death rate. We lack not only the absolute numbers, but also other factors. It's certain that there were great population fluctuations resulting from expulsions or from persecutions and then, of course, massacres, which often destroyed entire communities. Therefore, any estimate can be based only upon actual available statistics such as tax records and martyrology lists." But that's an interesting list, right? People who were burnt, people who were massacred. "These figures are more or less accurate, but relate only to a particular time and place. It is clear that we are dealing primarily with an urban Jewish population, having diverse occupations which differed from place to place, so it's difficult to place it." Now, one thing he has here is this is a drawing, sketches or Jewish figures from the 15th century. This is how people dressed, as the man and the woman. Now, let me move this down. Let me see if I can keep it going. In the year 1290, major expulsions is the topic. Edward I expels Jews of England. 1306, Philip IV, expels Jews of France. Louis X readmits Jews for a 12-year period. Number 1322, Charles IV again expels Jews from France. 1367, expulsion from Hungary. 1381, expulsion from Strasbourg. 1394, Charles VI expels the Jews of France. 1421, expulsion from Austria. 1426, expulsion from Cologne. 1439, expulsion from Augsburg. Move on a little bit more. 1450, expulsion from Bavaria. 1453, expulsion from Breslau. 1467, expulsion from Tlemcen, I don't know that. 1483, expulsion from Andalusia. 1492, the entire expulsion from Spain. Expulsion from Sardinia in 1492. 1492 was a bad time, really bad time. 1493, expulsion from Sicily. 1495, expulsion from Lithuania. 1496, expulsion from Portugal, replaced in 1497 by forced conversion. Now, that's a whole story that we do not know. And unfortunately, it's an ugly story that Dr. BEINART will come to it, and he will explain it, what happened. You see that the interesting thing about all of this is that with all the expulsions, and we were just really persecuted out of Europe, so now Jews are back in Europe again. What a mistake. We're still here. We're still here, and after this Pope is gone, which he doesn't look like he's in really good shape, it'll be another Pope, a different change. We'll see what it is. There are good popes, bad popes. The other Pope, I can't remember his name. That was a Polish Pope. Time of Ronald Reagan in the 80s. It was great. But then after that, before him, you had Pope Pius XII, who aided the Nazis. So you have all kinds of different things, because these people are actually not friends of ours. And one of the things that I wanted to do, and I haven't done it, was to tell the the Jewish way of looking at the situation. Is that we actually have a twin brother. Jacob, who was our forefather, had a twin brother. His name was Esau, Esav in Hebrew. These two, Esav hates the Jews. And the rabbi's tradition is that Asa became the Romans became the church is pervasive throughout all of Europe. And it's my personal opinion. Take it as you will, because it would be a controversial thing to say, that the Jesus model is really the Jewish people. Jesus, whoever Jesus was crucified amongst tens of thousands of other Jews who were also crucified. The color red, which is the color of the Pope's beanie, his cape, the color of blood. This is their thing. They can skate. They are the real warriors of this world who have the weapons that are capable of producing a tremendous amount of blood. The blood also is spilled against Jews, innocent Jews, and that's part of their heritage. We'll get into that more, talk about it, but I really think that the Jews, categorically as a people, are the sacrifice that's represented by Jesus. In England, the statistical information on England relates only to the period of the expulsion. Basing himself on tax records, the historian Georg Caro, is in the year 1867, he died in 1912, estimated the size of the Jewish population in 1280 to 1283. There is therefore expulsion, that is before the expulsion, at between 2,500 and 3,000. This is considerably a smaller figure than is arrived at by various other calculations, which place the number between 15,000 and 17,500. Now we're talking about England now. The historian S.W. Barron, 1895 to 1989, he assumed that the correct figure lies between the two estimates. In London, there were apparently no more than 2,000 to 2,500 Jews, and the bulk of the Jewish population resided in the rest of England. Therefore, it would seem that the total number of Jews in England at the time of the expulsion, which was 1290 when we were kicked about, I think this is our friend King Richard the Lionhearted, along with good old Robin Hood, was about 10,000, a very small number in relation to the general population, which is estimated at 3.5 mil. Next, France. The statistics for French Jewry are also meager. In the south of what is today France, there was a dense Jewish population, according to Benjamin of Tudela. The town of Arles had 200 Jewish families when he stopped there in 1160, while in 1194 the Jews were more than 25% of the town's population. A similar situation existed in the town of Tarascon. On the other hand, in September 1341, King Robert found that there were 1,205 Jews living in 203 houses in Aix-en-Provence. That is, no more than 10% of the general population. Narbonne experienced a decline in Jewish population in 1305. There were no more than 1,000 Jews in comparison to 15,000 residents, about 7%. Toulouse, I don't know how you pronounce it, but I pronounce it Toulouse, but I think it's probably something else, had 15 Jewish families in 1391. Now, that's 1 year before the massive pogrom that took place, or that is the year, I think, actually, of the pogrom that took place in Spain. And the situation was similar in Béziers, Albi, and other towns in southern France. Only in the port town of Marseille was there a large Jewish community. In 1358, at Avignon, 200 heads of Jewish families swore allegiance to the Pope. Its Jewish population grew toward the end of the century, and in 1414, the community requested permission to enlarge the area of the cemetery. In the 1490s, refugees from Spain arrived at Avignon, but it is still difficult to calculate the size of the Jewish community in a town which was one of the largest in Europe, having 30,000 inhabitants in the year 1355. Carpentra, I don't know how you pronounce it, had 364 Jewish family heads in 1276, and despite the expulsion in 1322, the community grew to 90 families, 90 family heads in 1343. In 1486, the townspeople exerted pressure to reduce the area of the Jewish quarter, whose members in 1476 numbered 12% of the town's population. In northern France, the town of Troyes, which my French friend says is pronounced Troyes. So in the town of Troyes, there were no more than 100 Jews during Rashi's time. So you see how close his family was, because it was a small group to begin with. That's in the years 1040 to 1105. While the expulsion of 1182 put a halt to Jewish population growth, it did not affect the Jews of Champagne, Burgundy, Poitou, or Normandy. In 1182, there were equal numbers of Jews and Christians resided in Paris. There was a large concentration of Jews resided in Villejuif, I don't pronounce it, near Paris. However, in the 13th and 14th centuries, their numbers in Paris were on the decline. Jews resided in hundreds of small towns, and the historian Heinrich Gretz, in the years 1817 to 1891, estimated that in 1306 there were 100,000 Jews who were expelled by Philip IV the Fair. He was fair. Okay, we're going to stop right here. We still have Germany to take a look at, Italy, Spain, and the Jewish populations in Europe. We'll see that drawing. And here is, we're going to read it, the expulsion order from Spain, from our friends, Fernando and Doña Isabella.